Hello, welcome to this final video in this series of that we've had for interpreting the output. So this is just a short kind of wrap up of everything, just to think about what we've looked at and some broad suggestions for reporting and things like that. So if we move on to thinking about some of the kind of the key formats with APA style, so APA style kind of recommends that in each instance you would look at whether the information is most clearly presented in either in text or in a table format. And APA, the 7th edition of the publication manual, gives some really explicit guidelines as to when you might want to move from in text reporting to tables, and I think it's something around the when you've got more than 3 pieces of information that you need to kind of present together, then you might want to think about reporting it in a table. So for example, with our ANOVA we had multiple effects that we wanted to present, with our MANOVA the same, and with the regression with the predictors and things also the same, and it may be that actually then it would make more sense to report those in a table and describe those in text rather than trying to report the statistics themselves in text. But just to give you a sense of how you would report them, the standard kind of format would be for ANOVA, for example, you would denote it by an F ratio, so the F. You would have the degrees of freedom from the model for the effect that you're interested in, and then you would look down the table into the column labelled error, and you would report the degrees of freedom for the error as well. You'd report the F value itself, the P value exactly, unless the p-value is reported as 0.000 in the output, in which case you would have, rather than p equals, you would say p is less than 0.001. And then you should report some kind of effect size where possible. For example, the one that's reported by SPSS is partially to squared, so it looks like that. So you have a copy of these slides on Blackboard at the top of the page. It's got all of the slides sort of together, so you can copy that kind of format to help you. If you were reporting your descriptive statistics, then almost certainly they would make more sense to be reported in your in a table. And don't forget things like confidence intervals for the means or things like that. That can really help as well. For MANOVA, it's very similar in terms of how you present it. So again, you've got your F ratio, but this time you would also have that initial value, so the p-lies trace value, for example, that we used. If not, it might be the Wilks lambda or so on, and then the associated test with that. So, and again, the same things apply in terms of reporting descriptive statistics in a table or so on. The format for regression is similar. Again, you would normally report your adjusted R² value, equals and whatever the value is, and then in brackets you would have the statistical significance result for the overall model. And then when it came to your actual predictors, then it would make more sense to report those in a table, because there are usually, if it's a multiple linear regression, there are multiple predictors, and actually it makes the comparisons between them easier if they're in a table. But you must remember, if you report a table, then you have to describe the results in the text. So you can't just put a table in and let it do the talking for you, but it might be a way of organising the statistical evidence in a more kind of succinct way. So some general guidance. There's a really good blog by the APA that they've got, and they've got some information from the 7th edition of the APA manual. Now you can, for this assessment, use either the 6th or the 7th. That's absolutely fine, but please be consistent. The tables across the 2 versions, the 2 editions, are relatively similar. Where the difference lies mainly in the presentation of figures, which we'll come on to next. But the APA say that there are a number of standards that you should really be trying to maintain when you're reporting tables. So they should have a number, they should have a descriptive title, but it should be brief. There should be headings for each of the columns, including the leftmost column, which is sometimes called the stub column. If in doubt, label that as variable. which is normally it's a variable. You can use different kinds of notes if you need to explain something in the table itself. For example, if you've used abbreviations or probabilities. So there are different kinds of notes you can attach, but use them sparingly. So only if you really need to. And then limit the use of borders or lines because they argue it makes it look clearer and more straightforward to interpret. I think sometimes it can actually make it harder, but there we are. So this is an example that the style blog provides. So it gives you a nice kind of clear idea of the table numbers. This is the stub column. These are the column headers. Or headings, and then each of the cells we've got some idea. We have got some lines splitting this up because it makes sense to, and some of the notes. They've given an illustration of each of the different kinds of notes you might attach to the table. In terms of formatted figures, as I said, this is where you see most of the differences between the two editions with the 6th and 7th edition of the APA manual. So if you use the 6th, just be consistent. If you use the 7th, be consistent, but you can use either approach. Again, there's a link to the blog where it talks about presenting figures. They should have, each figure should be given a number. They should have a descriptive figure title. So this is the 7th edition. But underneath that, you should have a clear note that explains the trends in the graph. Short, but clear. Now, the 6th edition, the title and the note are combined and they are presented underneath the figure. So that's the main difference. But for both editions, they should be clear. So the images should be clear. If you're using lines, they should be, again, smooth, sharp. There shouldn't be any issues with trying to, figure out what's going on. And so you shouldn't really have a background colour unless there's a particular reason, that sort of thing. Font should be easy to read. Your axes of the graph should be clearly labelled, and the units of measurement that they're based on should be clearly provided. And any elements, so figure keys, anything like that within the figure itself should be clearly labelled and explained. And so they provide an example here, and I know ironically actually the image you're looking at is fairly blurred, so yes. But here you can see both your axes are labelled clearly, the units are clearly labelled, we understand what the lines represent. This is the 7th edition, so we've got a figure number and a short title at the top and then a note underneath. As I said, if this was the 6th edition, the figure number would be underneath, and the title and the note, the title would actually be a caption, so it would incorporate this information more in it. So there are key differences, but just be consistent. So either 6th or 7th is fine as long as you stick to that throughout. So for more ideas about kind of interpreting the statistics we've covered, I've provided some links here to other resources, some of which we have as electronic copies, some of which are free. Others, Laird Statistics, have extended guides which are you have to pay a small fee for, but they are very detailed and they are good, and you pay for them as long as you need access to them. There are also some additional practice activities from previous years that I've provided in this in the interpreting the findings subfolder. They are based on the APA 6th edition and the walkthroughs that you've been looking at, and some of them are some additional practice activities with videos again explaining interpretation, different approaches to kind of interpreting different issues, and so they're there if you need them as well. I hope this series of videos has been helpful. If you have any questions, please do post to the discussion forum, but if not, good luck with all your assessments, and yes, thank you for watching.